Let's begin with our top focus on West Asia this hour, as the 3-year-old Gulf crisis might be finally coming to an end, one that has pitted a regional group of nations against Doha. Qatar's foreign minister says that there has been some progress to resolve the dispute. This after Saudi Arabian foreign minister revealed on Friday that a resolution to the bitter dispute with Qatar seemed within reach.
We are hopeful that things will move in the right direction. Right now, we cannot predict whether it's going to be imminent and is going to resolve the whole issue in one day. I think that the conflict has took too long. It's more than 3.5 years right now, and I think that it will need also a time that after resolution to heal.
We've made significant progress in the last few days, thanks to the continuing efforts of Kuwait, but also thanks to strong support from President Trump and the US administration towards bringing all parties closer. And we hope that this progress can lead to a final agreement, which looks in reach, and I can say I am somewhat optimistic that we are close to finalizing an agreement between all the nations in the dispute to come to a resolution that we think will be satisfactory to all.
And so this expected deal comes after senior advisor to the US President Jared Kushner arrived in the region. Earlier this week, Jared Kushner met with both the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in Riyadh and the Emir of Qatar, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, in Doha. Both these countries are key US allies, and this looks like a last-ditch effort to resolve the crisis before the Trump administration leaves office in January. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is hopeful any agreement between Qatar and the boycotting countries would be made on a foundation that is lasting.
We are very hopeful that the dispute between the Saudis and the Qataris can be resolved. We hope so because we think that's important for peace throughout the Middle East, but most importantly, we think it's the right thing for the people of each of those countries. We're going to keep working to do what we can to facilitate conversations and dialogue.
Let's also tell you about what this dispute was all about. In 2017, Saudi led its allies, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain and Egypt, to cut ties with Qatar, accusing the emirate of supporting terrorism and having close ties with Iran, cutting off diplomatic and trade ties. Now, the Quartet imposed a land, sea and an air embargo on the country Doha that has repeatedly rejected the accusations as baseless. For more details, let's quickly go across to our guest, Mir Javed Anfar, who's a West Asia analyst and is joining me live from Tel Aviv at this hour. Thank you, Mir, for joining our broadcast. Now, to begin with, why is it crucial for the Gulf to lift the blockade over Qatar, that too when Saudi accused the country of supporting terrorism and extremist groups?
It's very important for President Trump. President Trump wants to, with this move, he wants to strike two blows. And one is against Iran, and the other one is against Mr. Erdogan in Turkey. We know that, since the Qatari-Saudi rift, the Qataris have moved somewhat closer to Iran, and this has been something that has concerned President Trump. But more importantly, the rift has really strengthened relations between Qatar and Turkey. And President Trump basically wants to weaken the link between Qatar and Turkey and Qatar and Iran, and he wants to isolate both of them and to leave that at least as part of his legacy. This especially regarding Iran. It's very important for President Trump that the Persian Gulf region becomes united again in its stance against Iran, because that seems to be the legacy that he wants to leave.
Right. It's interesting that you mentioned Iran, a country that I was just coming to. Since the break in relations, Qatar's ties with Iran have grown closer, as you also just mentioned. Will the deal with Qatar now be a step closer to the United States, which is, of course, an arch rival to Iran? And how should this be going down with Iran?
To be honest with you, among other things, I also teach Iranian politics. the closeness between Qatar and Tehran is not as a result of this rift with Saudi Arabia, is not as close as the proximity that was created or improvement in relations between Qatar and Turkey. Nevertheless, to Iran, Saudi Arabia is an enemy, is a very strong and a very serious enemy. That's the way the Iranian regime views the Saudis. So the rift was a very welcome development. They wanted to see the Saudis, basically the Persian Gulf Council, divided, and to see Qatar, which is a relatively strong country, especially in its soft power because of Al Jazeera, go against Saudi Arabia is very important for Iran. So it's not going to, if it happens, it wouldn't, if this rift is healed, it's not going to go down well in Tehran, but it's going to go down much worse in Turkey because Mr. Erdogan, because his economy is doing badly, is really relying on the Qataris for financial support.
That's an interesting point that you've made. Now, when you look at the Gulf, do you think that the ideological rift is more between Qatar and the UAE, not so much with Saudi Arabia?
That's an excellent question. Look, I think generally the UAE and the Saudis, you can't expect everybody in the family to sing from the same hymn sheet. I mean, in my family or in your family, everybody's got a different opinion. The problem was in the Persian Gulf Council, Cooperation Council, is that the Qataris, as far as the Saudis and the Emiratis were concerned, were too close to the Muslim Brotherhood movement in different parts of the world. Before in Egypt, when Morsi was around, and then they accused the Qataris of being close to Iran. I think the way there are a number of other things. It will take a long time to go through them.
Right.
But one of the things that really I think made the Saudis and the UAE stand away from Qatar and led to the rift was because they believed that the Qataris were just doing their own thing and they were not coordinating at all, whereas before, and the Saudis and the Muslim Brotherhood, they really was like, chalk and cheese. So I think it was, there was no coordination and everybody going in a different direction. And now I think as a result, if we're going to see an agreement, they're going to find a way of managing these differences in a better way in the future.
Right. And interestingly enough, as you mentioned, if we see an agreement, would you now credit the Trump administration for the stepped up diplomacy in the Gulf region?
I would, to be honest with you, for a man who has been accused of wanting war, look, I wouldn't have voted Trump if I were in America, but you can't argue with facts, right? He's what he's done in terms of bringing Israel and the UAE together, Israel and Bahrain together, now trying to find a solution with Qatar and Saudi Arabia. These are all to his credit. But at the same time, before we get carried away and attribute it just to his peaceful intentions, there is one motivation behind all of these. Well, two, but one big one, and that's Iran. President Trump has done all these things to isolate the Islamic Republic of Iran, and second after that is Mr. Erdogan, who is trying to create an alliance between Turkey, Qatar, Pakistan, and that affects your country, India, and I think more or less with Malaysia. And I think they're trying to also de-link that because they see Mr. Erdogan as an actor who's bringing instability.
Absolutely, and we'll have to wait and watch till the 20th of January when President-elect Joe Biden takes over the United States to see how things pan out.
There's no guarantee that there will be an agreement. I just wanted to say that the Qatars and the Saudis, let's also, keep our optimism within limits.
Well said, well said. Mir, thank you so much for joining our broadcast on Beyond.
Thank you.